All right. This is your Gaza War Sit Rep Day 165. No end in sight. Starvation proceeds. And today there's a number of things. I want to talk about the battle that's going on at Shifa Hospital in North Gaza, in Gaza City. And that's the primary thing, but there's news from all the other fronts. So we'll talk about those. And then maybe a little bit about starvation as a weapon. Everybody understands that there are many historical parallels. I'll talk a little bit about Ireland, Canada, India. There's so many, and I'll just make some general points. Maybe in a future sit rep, I'll talk more about that issue. So let's start with not the France. Actually, let me start with the rhetorical issues. There's been a bunch of rhetoric, and there was a performance in the Canadian Parliament. I didn't pay much attention to it. You guys, if you watched the video we did with Matteo and Alex a couple days back, we kind of debriefed the 5-hour debate between where Finkelstein and Mouin Rabbani debated some genocide defenders, a 5-hour debate, and we had a critique of it. Some of you had really, I think, good comments defending the idea of debating even in such circumstances, and I think some of you made some fair points. I think we made some fair points too. Maybe we're having a debate. You see what I did there? So perhaps there is value in debating even in these times. I'm not against debating as a teacher. I think of debate as one of the most important pedagogies. I think there's an exploration based pedagogy where you guide people to explore things themselves and discover things. There's a debate based pedagogy where you debate and you find your way dialectically to the truth. And there's a more Socratic pedagogy where you ask questions and you lead people to answers. And there's other pedagogies where you correct people, you teach, and then you pare away mistakes until you have and make corrections until you have something really good. So there's debating is firmly inside of that scheme for me. But some of these debates, they have the form of a debate that's looking like a search for truth, but they don't actually do that. And what they do is something else. And there was a debate in the Canadian Parliament, which also was, I assumed it would be a kind of a grotesque spectacle, so I didn't spend much time engaging it. Maybe some of you did. I know a lot of the listeners are Canadian. I couldn't stand it, and I didn't have time for it. And from what I've read, I don't think I missed much. There was David Mastracci from the Maple did a debunking. So debunking Parliament's cross-partisan pro-Israel propaganda published today. Yesterday's debate on the NDP's Palestine motion contained false and troubling statements from many major parties. And that's probably a good thing to check out. That's the correction-based pedagogy, isn't it? He's looking at all the mistakes and errors and falsehoods, lies, out and out lies, and that's the problem with using the debate form with people who tell out and out lies. That is the thing we were critiquing with Matteo and Alex on day 163. So the other discourse thing that I wanted to talk about, I discovered another person on Twitter, an Israeli critic, actually. I discovered him because he had a really strong statement against the Hollywood, they called themselves Jewish Hollywood creatives, who came out to condemn the speech made at the Oscars by the director, who said he repudiates Jewishness being used to justify occupation. He didn't say genocide. And this person on Twitter, I hadn't heard of him until this moment, but he had this tweet where he said, why stop there? Why not say you want to see more torture and more children die and more starvation? Why not go all out? And there was something about the righteous rage in that tweet that I thought, okay, I'll give this guy a follow. And he had another tweet as I scrolled through his timeline. This one I thought was really good. He said, "It's easy to be dragged into the quagmire of aid and ceasefire, but it would be a grave mistake to waste too much energy on that. Of course, it's crucial Palestinians do not starve and crucially important to stop this genocide, but the real issue must remain and must always be Palestinian statehood, Palestinian independence, Palestinian dignity, and guaranteeing Palestinians have full human and political rights in a way that cannot be affected and is not dependent on Israeli goodwill. A major part of the ongoing colonial cinema, colonial theatrics, and colonial tokenistic discourse is to stall and obfuscate the real root cause of this, and that is the fact that Palestinians are subject to a US-backed brutal military dictatorship, and this shameful, amoral, and unacceptable reality must change. This must be the goal before our eyes always." And that's just solid. Absolutely solid. Because the issue I mentioned in day 163, the last video with Matteo and Alex, is now we're talking about aid, and we're talking about preventing starvation, and we're talking about our desperation to prevent these things. And the baseline of what we're asking for just keeps getting lower and lower and lower. And that's totally unacceptable. This conflict is happening because Palestinians are denied the same rights that everybody else has, and that cannot continue. Palestinians, the world cannot allow or tolerate a population of a few million people just being able to be victims at the mercy of another group of people just because we all endorse their own idea of racial supremacy, because they have special rights to commit genocide and murder that others do not. So that's what's unacceptable, and that's what we have to keep our eye on. And that previous tweeter, I think, made a really, really good point. Okay, I just those were just some things about discourse that I wanted to get out of the way, cobwebs that I wanted to get out of the way before we get into the battle. And I guess the other point is, I think I've said this before, but the Canadian Parliament, they were going to pass a ceasefire resolution, and they amended it. Basically, what I understand is they amended. I know that people in the Palestine movement are divided on this. Some people think it was a little bit better than useless. I've heard the word partial victory. I've heard the word that it moves us forward. I didn't look into it that closely, so you can take my opinion with a grain of salt. I don't think it moves us forward at all. I don't think it makes. I think it was a very sleazy spectacle. I think the amendments are such that it made it almost worse than if there was nothing. But that's just how it looks like for someone who didn't look into it all that much. And my point is, either way, no matter what you think, it's on the battlefield that this is going to be decided. And that's why we've been devoting so much of our energy to analysis of the military part of this conflict, because that is ultimately where this is going to be decided. So the Iraq front, I mentioned we hadn't heard from Iraq in a couple of days. We had on March, the day I said that, Iraq showed up with a attack on the Golan Heights with a drone, and Iraq also, I believe today, hit Ben Gurion Airport again, and with a drone. So they've drone with multiple drones. So multiple drones from Iraq have hit Ben Gurion Airport in the past few days. That's Tel Aviv, that's Israel's main airport. And the Yemen, Ansar Allah in Yemen also has hit, they sent a long range, maybe drone, maybe missile, and they hit the Israeli port of Eilat March 18th, so yesterday. So that's 2 attacks on Israeli ports and airport, seaport, and they're attacking them. They're attacking them with missiles and drones. And Ansar Allah also today announced that they attacked an American ship. I believe it's called the Mado. And let me just give me 1 second to try to find it. Yeah, the American ship Mado with a number of anti-ship missiles, as well as the attack on Eilat. So those two, of course, Hezbollah has continued attacking on that front as well. So Hezbollah announced yesterday, March 18th, Shaba Farms, Talat al-Tayhat, Shaba Farms, Bayad Blida, Berkat Risha, Hadab Yaren, all struck with rockets and missiles. And today, Berkat Risha, Al-Malikiya, Tayhat Hill, Branit, Zaret, Ruaisat al-Alam. So 10, 20 attacks in the past 2 days from Hezbollah. So the rockets, the drones, the missiles all continue to strike in the West Bank. Major fighting in Jenin. I've seen fighting in Nablus. I've seen reports. Maybe not the Americans, maybe the Americans. The Israelis with American planes and bombs also hit Damascus again. So that's probably one of hundreds. So, but as far as the resistance goes, yeah, major fighting in the West Bank as well. So I think with that, we can get to Gaza. So Gaza is a major thing is unfolding. And this is a story that has to be told. This is a very important thing to chronicle, and I'm not sure, just in case everybody wasn't following what happened. So we covered here in the Sit Reps the barge from World Central Kitchen, and some more information has emerged about that World Central Kitchen. I think I'm coming to the conclusion that it was a stunt. I was initially trying to revise my assumptions after I had predicted that Israel was not going to allow the stunt at all, and then they did. And that on that same day or around that time, Israel also got quite a few trucks worth of flour coming from the south. So it wasn't just that barge, it was also trucks from Rafah, and the flour was distributed. Now, if you've been following the Sit Reps, you know John Elmer has described how the Israelis have been trying very hard to create a chaotic situation. And the chaotic situation is something very artificial, because what's happened is municipal services, state kind of organization is the Palestinian society is very well organized in Gaza. It has been organized life despite constant destruction since 2005, despite repeated bombing and destructive campaigns. Gaza, Palestinian life is organized at the highest level. They had many higher education institutions. They had advanced hospitals. They had doctors of all specialties. They had schools, educating every child. They had garbage pickup. They had all of these, everything that you imagine a modern state can provide, they were able to do while being destroyed every few years by Israel. So it's in the history books, this is going to be an incredible feat. It's going to be recorded as an incredible feat just to maintain organized life under these conditions while building an army, while building a military, attempting to build a military deterrent to these attacks. It's gonna be understood to be an amazing thing that they did here. But Israel has all the while, it's not just bombing, they've been trying to destroy this social basis of organization of Palestinian society. And how have they done it? Well, when al-Qaeda and the Islamic State were surging in the region, in Egypt and of course Iraq, Syria, elsewhere, Israel had alliances with I guess they talk about it in terms of families, but they had alliances and relationships between Israel's spy organizations and certain collaborators that subscribe to that kind of Islamic State ideology in Gaza. And they were trying to get some kind of civil war situation going between the Islamic State types of characters in Gaza and Hamas. And ultimately, and this is I included this context in my book Siege Breakers about this. This was like the opening was, I kind of made the opening of the sequence of the book, the last moments of that civil war, and then the war with Israel was what followed in the book. So it's something that my research got me into even years ago when I was writing that book. So that was, then they call them tribes or clans or families, and they've been trying to arrange a way to have the humanitarian aid go through those connections, but those connections haven't been amenable to it. Israel maybe hopes that if they can destroy enough of Gaza, then whoever they can, it'll make it easier to recruit people. So in the meantime, which is in the here and now, the organization and distribution of aid can only be done by the legitimate government in Gaza, the governing body in Gaza, which means Hamas. And so Hamas is the government, and so the police force, and John said this on the sit reps, when the police force comes out to do things like help organize aid distribution, that's when Israel targets them and assassinates them. And so there was apparently negotiation and some kind, that's probably ongoing to say, okay, if the aid can be distributed by the government officials in Gaza, then we can prevent these chaotic situations from unfolding. And then, so the officials have come out and tried to organize, and then the Israelis have killed the aid recipients, they've killed the officials and conducted these massacres. So what happened after these trucks got through was the person coordinating all of this was Fayek Abdul Rauf al-Mabhu, and here's his photo. And it was a very successful coordination by Fayek Abdul Rauf al-Mabhu. This is Miriam from Gaza that reported this on Twitter. It was an article in Mondo Weiss as well. And they after that successful distribution of flour, people had some flour for the first time in a long time because of this coordination and negotiation that was coordinated by the director of police operations, al-Mabhu, that's when Israel attacked al-Shifa hospital and assassinated him in al-Shifa hospital, and today executed 50 people in the courtyard, and they've revived the atrocity machine of bombing al-Shifa hospital and all the propaganda and the lying machine about how it's Hamas. They destroyed Hamas in the apparently in al-Shifa. They found Hamas diapers or whatever it is that they're always looking for in al-Shifa last time, months ago, and now they're doing it all again. So, and we're supposed to believe it again this time. They're also taking their usual trophy photos of Israeli soldiers putting on diapers on each other. Maybe that's making fun of themselves, as well as posing in the operating room, pretending to be operating on one another. So just sort of, I'm not exactly sure what the joke is. I guess the joke is that Palestinians have medical facilities or something. So here's the difference. The difference is there are a couple of differences from a military standpoint as well. And that is that is going to be significant this time. Because last time Israel attacked al-Shifa hospital, they were going from one hospital to another. Maybe you followed it on the sit reps and Electronic Intifada's live streams or other sources, or maybe maybe you're tuning in now, you didn't follow it. But in those times, months ago, when Israel was attacking one hospital after another and destroying one hospital after another, the whole, if you want to call it, anti-genocide community that was watching helplessly and horrified, we all thought maybe something would stop them. We all thought maybe there would be the US would call it off. Maybe there would be some concern about public opinion or future war crimes tribunals or something. We all thought that this is a really new, qualitatively different kind of operation, attacking a hospital, making the hospital the target of a military operation was a new level of depravity, which is very rarely seen. And so I think there was a lot of disbelief, and it's possible that the resistance also shared that disbelief. They also thought maybe something was going to stop them, and they didn't want to have a battle in a hospital or around a hospital, because that would just empower Israel even more. Also, last time, Israel had not yet depopulated much of the north. There were 1 million people in the north that are now in refugee camps in Rafah, in the very south of Gaza now, on the border with Egypt. And so there was just many, many more people around. And so what has happened now, in the full knowledge of what Israel does when there's no fighting, which is just slaughter everybody in sight, starting with the children, and take trophy photos, and in the full and with less civilian presence, the resistance is fighting the Israelis as the Israelis are attacking the hospital. And so the field reports from the past 2 days are all reporting clashes between the Israelis and the resistance. So and that's the news from the Gaza front that I wanted to report. We had been talking about fighting in Zahra neighborhood on one side of the Road 10, and then previously the battle in Zaytun on the other side of that same road. And now we're talking about a battle over the past 2 days at al-Shifa hospital. Al-Qassam reports today yesterday. Al-Qassam reported yesterday fierce clashes with invaders near al-Shifa hospital, targeting a number of their military vehicles, resulting in casualties and injuries among them. Al-Aqsa Martyrs brigades engaged in fierce clashes using machine guns and appropriate weapons against the occupation forces in the vicinity of al-Shifa hospital. Targeted invading military vehicles near al-Shifa hospital. Engaged in armed clashes with the Israeli forces invading the western area of Gaza City. Omar al-Qassam forces, since the early hours of dawn, fierce clashes in the vicinity of al-Shifa hospital. It has been confirmed that a military vehicle, a troop carrier, was targeted with a guided explosive near the Ministry of Transport and Communications building and was directly hit. So these are joint operations, clashes, all by the hospital. When the Israelis set up to attack a hospital last time, they took their time, right? They prepared, they took their time, they got everything into place, and then they just started attacking the hospital as if it was some kind of military fort. Well, now as they're setting up and as they've started their attack on the hospital, they are finding themselves under attack by the resistance. So today's report, the fighting continues. Al-Qassam brigades, Hamas's armed wing, targeted 7 military vehicles with Yasin 105 rockets in the vicinity of al-Shifa, targeted a group of occupation soldiers with TBG, so the thermobaric grenades, resulting in casualties in the vicinity of al-Shifa. Al-Quds brigades targeted 2 military vehicles with tandem and RPG shells in the vicinity of al-Shifa, engaged in fierce clashes with Israeli force using machine guns in the vicinity of al-Shifa. Al-Aqsa Martyrs brigades engaged in fierce clashes using machine guns and RPGs in the axis near al-Shifa, and shelling. They're not just fighting there, but all the factions are issuing field reports. The Mujahideen brigades engaged in fierce clashes with IOF forces and their military vehicles with various weapons in the vicinity of al-Shifa, targeted 2 Merkava tanks, causing direct hits in the vicinity of al-Shifa. And there are reports of Israeli officers being killed in the fighting there. So another interesting thing, which you may have seen, which I'm sure will be on the Electronic Intifada live stream tomorrow, is you have seen probably the video that Al-Qassam released to Al Jazeera, the network, where they showed the operation in which they targeted a high-ranking officer, the officer who was responsible for the first attack on al-Shifa hospital and all the massacres there that took place during that attack. And they targeted him and they killed him with a sniper rifle, and they made a detailed video and they sent it to Al Jazeera for viewing. So lots of people saw that. And this is also maybe a reason why they came back and they're committing this revenge on the hospital, because when the first time they committed a bunch of atrocities and massacres at the hospital, the leader of that operation was killed. And now they're going to avenge that leader by committing massacres at the hospital again. But there's a very interesting thing that many people have noted, which is that there's a video that the Israelis made of some Israeli commander at al-Shifa hospital issuing a threat and ultimatum and whatever it is. And as you see, this military commander is putting out this video with his back to the camera and somewhat of a what can we say? Somewhat of a disguise. This could be anybody. And so you can see already some kind of deterrence, where instead of flaunting his identity in front of the world for all to see that he's commanding this macho operation of slaughtering patients in a hospital, he's doing it with his back to the camera because he doesn't want to be made and targeted by the resistance. So unlike the first time that al-Shifa hospital was targeted, the conditions are different this time. And this is now a battle for Shifa Hospital. And I don't know how it's going to go, but it looks like it's the hospital is being really contested, and it's not going to be a smooth rollout of a massacre and propaganda operation the way that it was last time. And I don't know what they think they accomplished last time besides crossing various moral barriers of themselves, but they did it, and they're trying to do it again. And this time they're in an actual battle. So we'll be continuing to report on that and in the coming days as that unfolds. So because of the advance of the starvation plan and the unfolding of the starvation plan, I just wanted to make a few comments, historical comments on the pattern of the use of famine. And I think of famine as a weapon, starvation as a weapon of war, as a pretty quintessentially British Empire thing to do. It was, if you, and here are some sources for you. One of them is, I've mentioned this many times in the historical podcast. It's called The American Way of War, or The First Way of War, sorry. The First Way of War, American War Making on the Frontier. And the author is Grenier, John Grenier, Grenier. And John Grenier in this book goes from one so-called Indian War to another, 1607 to 1814. So in some ways, the worst American genocides against indigenous nations had not even happened. But he's talking about 1607 to 1814. And what he talks about is the idea of skipping the phase where you fight the opposing military forces, going straight after women, children, villages, food sources, farmers' fields, storehouses. That's what the first way of war is. And that's, look at the dates. The dates are 1607 to 1814. So Protestant Reformation. These are English troops. This is not America yet. This is the War of Independence is towards the end of the time covered by this book, right? It's 1770s, 1780s. This is when these were colonists with the English crown, and these were crown projects. And that, after the American War of Independence, the British continued the famine method of subduing their opponents, their colonial opponents in India. So many famines in India, and they got worse as British control consolidated. So there's lots of literature on that. You can look at the Patnaiks, Patnaik. You can look at Jason Hickel, Hickel. There have been recent studies where they tried to calculate how many people died of famines under the British Empire. About the Irish famine. I mean, today, I believe, or St. Patrick's Day just came and went. I just recorded an episode for our historical podcast about the Easter Rising. And the 1840s Irish famine was the quintessential, one of the quintessential famines that we remember and commemorate, and they call it a potato famine. But it's really important to remember these are not natural disasters. There's always some component of weather and climate. Oh yeah, of course, Mike Davis, Late Victorian Holocausts. That's the book you can read about British imperial famines in different parts of the world. So there's always some component of weather to it, but there's also a huge component of man-made action. And in the British case, it was punitive, and it was ideological, and it was like these people, it was racial, and it was also eugenicist. So like they're just going to breed anyway. If you feed them, they'll just breed more of them, so there's no point, we should let them starve. And lots of the people that you think of as names that were writers or politicians or people like that at the time, they were very much in favor of this weapon, and they were very much in favor of using this weapon. And in the historical podcast, we covered Canadian colonialism years ago. It was a 3-part series, and the role of famine in forcing First Nations of Western Canada onto reserves, taking their land from them in the 1880s. Famine was absolutely key, and they forced first Indigenous people who were starving to eat poisoned food. There was a famous Canadian official who said there were having received reports that they were given poisoned food that had gone bad, pork, bacon that had gone bad. The chiefs told the Canadian officials that this was bad meat. The official said, well, they can either eat the bacon or they can starve, or they can die, whatever. And they did. Some of them ate it and died, and the others starved to death, exactly according to plan. So they used starvation specifically as a tool of anti-Indigenous warfare throughout the Americas. I mean, North America, Canada, the US, wherever the British Empire was, there was the use of famine as a weapon. And so in that sense, what Israel is doing right now falls within that pattern of, and when historians look back at this, they always try to claim that it was weather and that it was potato blight, and they don't take into account the fact that the British were actually exporting food out of Ireland during the famine, and likewise India. Famines right up until the 1940s, but starting in the 1700s, tens of millions of people, maybe 100 million people died. More, actually, 100 million people died just during that late 19, like from the end of the 19th century to the end of colonialism. So there were just tens upon tens of millions of people that were dying of famine in India, man-made artificial famine that was being imposed by the British. Contemporary famines also usually take place during war. There's a writer who wrote about, I believe he wrote about Sudan. So American, I think, academic Alex de Waal, and there's a phrase that he used that I thought that really stuck with me. He said, starve. Starve is a transitive verb. It is something that one group of people does to another. And so that's what's happening in Gaza. The people of Gaza are being starved by Israel. And it's a popular policy in Israel. It's not a fringe policy. It's not something they're hiding. It's something they're proud of. And it's something that Western leaders also doesn't matter to them at all. They're happy to talk about aid and try to create a situation where we're reluctantly giving aid to these people who are starving because of no fault of anybody's. Even as Israelis go to demonstrations to block aid into Gaza, and even as the Israel lobby in Canada sues Canada for trying to restore funding to the United Nations Refugee Works Agency, and even as all of these countries that are surrounding Israel are feeding Israel. They're all shipping food to Israel so that Israel can eat while they starve Gaza. It's pretty extraordinary, but it does, I suppose, have historical precedence. Someone crunched some numbers. Apparently, we're at, I don't know, 140 million pounds of bombs and 8 million pounds of food. So, and as I've mentioned before, some of it being dropped at the exact same time. All right. So, yeah, the main news for tonight was the battle at al-Shifa hospital and the use of starvation as a weapon, and historical precedents for that. Both of these are going to continue to be right at the top of the news, or right at the top of these sit reps anyway in the coming days. So come back and we'll talk about them some more. And please like and subscribe, and check out the live stream tomorrow at Electronic Intifada. They've got some great guests lined up. I won't spoil, and we'll see you here either tomorrow night or shortly after. All right, hang in there.